the newsagents.
As chairman of the 1922 committee and returning officer in the leadership contest, I can now give you the results of the fourth and final parliamentary ballot, which is good news for all of us in that respect. So 120 MPs voted, and I can report the numbers of votes for each candidate as follows. Kemi Badenoch, 42 votes. James Cleverly, 37 votes. And Robert Jenrick, 41 votes. So as a result of that ballot, James Cleverly is eliminated from the contest, and Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick now go forward to the ballot of members. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Well, the result has just been announced, and it is pretty astonishing given what we heard yesterday. It is now a fight-off between Kemi Badenoch, who came top of the poll, and Robert Jenrick, who came second, and James Cleverly, who came in top yesterday, has come in third today. It's no wonder some people call the Conservative Party at Westminster the most duplicitous electorate in the world.
I think they like to say the most sophisticated electorate in the world, but I think yours is more on the money. This is a remarkable result, which, with all of the twists and turns which have led us to this point, despite the fact that she seemed at Conservative Party conference to be losing momentum by the minute, the net result of this, with the most MPs in support, is that Kemi Badenoch goes into this contest as the presumed frontrunner to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. Welcome to the newsagents.
It's John.
It's Emily.
It's Lewis.
And I think we're all a bit speechless in here, because that was not what was to be expected given the results yesterday. And there has obviously been the most bizarre horse trading going on. I presume people lending James Cleverly votes to get Tom Tugendhat out of the way for some reason, as if that was the name of the game. But who could have predicted, on the basis of yesterday's vote, that it would be the two right-wing candidates that would be facing off with the party membership? I mean, it's gobsmacking.
I'm still speechless. I love the fact that I'm so speechless. All I'm going to do is just remind everyone listening of the actual numbers. So remember yesterday when Tom Tugendhat was knocked out, James Cleverly was the only one who'd actually really amassed a bigger number. He was up 18 votes from the last time. This time, his number is 37, Jenrick is 41, and Badenoch is 42. Which means that Cleverly is out of the race.
And that means that Badenoch is up 12 on yesterday, Jenrick is up 10 on yesterday, having gone down yesterday, and Cleverly is down 2 from yesterday.
I genuinely think something's gone wrong.
Something has
I
gone
think
wrong.
something's gone
These
wrong.
results don't
because I think
make sense.
Well, no, what I mean is I think the horse trading that we were all talking about, you know, whether you ask people, if Cleverly thought that it was going to be him and Jenrick going through, then he would have thought, I can win that. So was he saying to people, go and vote for Jenrick to get Badenoch out? And actually, they've come off Cleverly's tally and gone to Badenoch. I genuinely think the horse trading has screwed up here.
I think what Cleverly has done and the Cleverly campaign has done has screwed up massively.
Yeah.
I think that they
Cleverly
have,
too clever by half.
Cleverly turns out not to be quite so clever.
Well, we don't know, but
we don't know. But
that would make more sense to me than suddenly people going off him.
One theory would clearly be that they had lent votes to one of the other candidates because they thought they would be easier to beat in the final two, probably Jenrick or whoever, and they miscalculated. They did not count how many supporters they actually had. They actually thought that they had more supporters, that they could afford to lose more supporters.
Because you're only talking 120.
And that's the thing, and I think that's been the unique thing about this contest, right? Which is that because the Conservative Party has been reduced to such small numbers, 121, the smallest parliamentary grouping they've ever had in their entire history, just tiny miscalculations, tiny shifts in the numbers can produce freak odd results. And I think that's what we've got here.
But it is
I
remarkable.
really don't believe it.
It is remarkable, off the back of a Conservative Party conference, where it was commonly accepted that James Cleverly far and away had the best conference. Tom Tugendhat had an unremarkable, error-free conference, but didn't score huge numbers of goals either. Kemi Badenoch was thought to have done really badly with some of the things that she'd said about maternity pay and other things where people were focusing in. And Robert Jenrick kind of had that very odd comments about the ECHR, which upset a lot of people.
Soldiers having to kill
Soldiers
people
having to kill rather than take
because of
them
the
captive.
ECHR.
Exactly.
But this is why I think something has gone wrong with Cleverly.
Yeah.
Because Tugendhat being eliminated, he had 20 votes yesterday. Now, they weren't exclusively from the kind of One Nation centre left wing of the party, but they were largely from that grouping. So on paper, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
That they would have
all
split.
gone to Cleverly.
Or like
the
a
assumption
decent,
is you would have
well,
said,
certainly
yeah.
enough of them to put him in front. Remember, if Cleverly had got 6 extra votes, he would not only be through to the last 2, but he'd be on top.
I think he tried to play the contest after this one.
Or
that's what I think happened.
Or the other thing that's happened is that Tugendhat's vote went up slightly because right-wingers were lending him support in the hope that it would lead Cleverly to be complacent about his own numbers. I mean, the skullduggery, the plotting, the scheming, the underhand, dubious tactics that have gone on are remarkable.
We don't know yet, but what we do know is that the next Tory leader is either going to be Robert Jenrick,
Exactly, that's what matters.
who believes that we should be leaving the ECHR, and if he gets to power, will presumably make sure that happens, or Kemi Badenoch, who is, as she says, the most forthright speaker of all of them until it gets to the precision of what her comments actually means, in which case quite often she falls apart.
So there's 2 things, right? So one is, like you say, Emily, in a sense, I mean, there will now be endless amounts of kind of analysis of trying to find out what went wrong with Cleverly and how this has worked out. But in one sense it matters in the sense that what has happened as a net result of this is that the candidate who Labour most feared, Cleverly, is gone. The people who will be most pleased about this result right now is number 10 Downing Street.
Best news they've had in
the
ages.
best news they've had probably since they came to office, actually, because they've
now got clear blue water, proper water between them and on what the next iteration of the Tory party
Cleverly
looks like.
was not like a perfect candidate in a sense. He had his political vulnerabilities and frailties for sure. But what they feared is here was a guy who was comfortable in his own skin, who could make Starmer look pretty stiff. He was making a whole play of the Conservative Party not being weird, trying to give a sort of sense of normality and wait for the Tory party to screw up. That's gone. What they're going to have now is 2 flavours of right. Jenrick, the sort of zeal of the convert, basically, as some focus groups have suggested, a kind of almost AI-generated looking kind of conservative kind of candidate who has calibrated exactly to where he thinks the Tory party is, which is on the right. Hard for him to tap back to the centre if that's even what he wants to do. Or Kemi Badenoch, who, as we know, has a tendency towards self-implosion and getting distracted by quite online right and conspiratorial conservative politics.
Do you know
and
what
that
I'd
is
like
a
to
much
do?
better opponent for Labour.
I'd just like to give a shout out actually to Stephen Bush, who wrote this article for the FT 6 hours ago saying, should James Cleverly try to choose his opponent in the final round, gambling with such a small electorate of MPs could end in humiliating defeat. I mean, he wrote that before it happened, and I'm sure it was sort of, a clever, thoughtful piece, and now he's absolutely spot on.
But look, I think we've got to look at the wider picture of what does this say about the Conservative Party and how does it position itself now for the rest of this Parliament with the new leader, either Jenrick or Badenoch. It always felt to me that if it came down to a choice between Cleverly and Jenrick or Cleverly and Badenoch or Jenrick would have won because the Conservative Party membership is way right of the Conservative Party in Parliament. And therefore and if you look at...
So you say it doesn't actually make any difference?
It doesn't make any difference, but the
mean.
difference it makes is that the Conservative Party, having been defeated by a rather centrist Labour government, where a large number of seats went to the Liberal Democrats because the Conservative Party was seen as too right-wing and people were just disillusioned after 14 years, the Conservative Party looks like the answer it's alighting on is, I know, we'll go further to the right. And that's why I think Keir Starmer will be delighted.
And they're Davy.
And Ed Davey.
In particular.
Ed Davey will
Off their
be
turf.
thrilled by this.
So I guess the question is, where does reform come into this? Because Jenrick is the man who wants to, I think, embrace reform. You know,
He wants to be more out-reform reform.
He wants to out-reform reform and takes out the ECHR. Badenoch has said, no, we don't need to turn into Farage. She has put distance between her and the Reform Party. And so there will be a calculation, presumably, amongst the membership of whether they like the direction reform is going. And if they pick Jenrick, what then essentially is the difference between the Conservative Party and the Reform Party?
I think this contest is wide open. Partly because, I think Badenoch is sort of actually, now that she's, albeit just by a hair's breadth, by one MP in front, and the fact that, generally speaking, her polling has been pretty good, although it's declined with Conservative members. I think people probably say just about she would be the favourite. But Jenrick will have quite a bit of party establishment support on his side. And I think, given, as we know, the propensity for Badenoch to make unforced errors, that this race is going to be a pretty electric one.
Look,
actually.
The membership voted Liz Truss over Sunak. So on that basis, if nothing's changed, I'd say Badenoch gets in over Jenrick.
I think so.
Elected IDS over Clark. You know, if you ever
but these are both two candidates of the right. Normally we generally, because you get a sort of one nation versus right. Here we've got two flavours of right. I'm sure what Badenoch will try and do is say that, you know, all of this from Jenrick is superficial, that he doesn't really believe anything that he's saying. This will basically end up being a contest in terms of the dynamics of one woman is saying, I am someone who, whatever you think of me, has always believed what I believe, and my convictions are deeply seated. This guy is simply telling you what he thinks you want to hear.
I think she is more of a conviction politician.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think he has been on, as we say euphemistically, a journey.
I honestly,
there are little moments here where we suddenly go, my God.
I think if cleverly, it's clear, I think that's what, but this is maybe like one of the biggest own goals I can think of in history of British politics.
Look, we just don't know. Do we ever get to see who voted? How they voted, a secret ballot, right?
So it's so what's so interesting about this is surely, logically, common sense says to you that if you are a Conservative Party member, you want to vote for the person who you think gives you the best chance of getting back into power at the next general election, rather than the person who is going to give you ideological purity and stand up for all the things that you believe in, even though the rest of the British electorate might not. And I feel that this is a sign of the Conservative Party taking itself away from where the centre of gravity is in British politics. I've always thought the centre of gravity in British politics is a little bit to the right of centre. That's why Blair was so successful, because he kind of sort of positioned his tent there. When have we seen a party of the far right? 2019 was exceptional because it was get Brexit done and Corbyn was the opponent. But I think that the danger is for the Conservative Party that it pushes itself out to a place on the right where the British people won't want to go.
Well, or we are going to be the next iteration of reform. And actually, if reform come after Labour, that's fine for us because we're going to have a pact and that's how we're going to get back in power. Look, we're ahead of ourselves. You know, we haven't even seen where this goes, right?
I think one thing it does mean is that, particularly if there's a Badenoch leadership, it means that the kind of intra-Conservative politics, the politics within the Conservative Party, is by definition going to be more volatile and more unstable than it would have been under someone like Cleverly. Because what Cleverly was the kind of unity candidate, sort of pacified candidate who could be a little bit of everything to everyone.
I think Alice Thompson described him as the Conservatives' sort of support animal. You know, it's the thing that you get to calm your nerves.
Whereas, particularly if it's Badenoch, or even Jenrick, because his support has generally come from such a sort of particular wing of the party, it means that the potential for factionalism and for factional unhappiness is all the greater, particularly if it's Badenoch, because she has such a vituperative style of politics. By the way, do you know where the book is? Not had a bad day. Do you know where odds closed at James Cleverly to be eliminated today from the contest? Where the odds were? No. Ladbrokes had it at 40-1.
Oh my word!
So if anyone made a nice little bet, a tenner
on James Cleverly,
I'm not sure that Tory MPs bet anymore, do they?
Oh, I bet they do.
I bet they bloody well do. VAT on school fees, they've got a lot of extra money to raise. We'll be back after the break. So on yesterday's podcast, we talked, and Emily had kind of heard this thing about there was going to be a lot more about borrowing to invest. And since then, there has been an awful lot more being said about what might be in Rachel Reeves' budget at the end of the month when she stands up and tries to set the course for Britain going forward. And there was a bit of it in the party conference speech about we need to kind of rethink what is good for the country rather than just what is the cost of something. And Lewis, you've been what have you been hearing?
Well, as we were saying yesterday, we thought that this change was coming, and indeed, during party conference season, we were saying then that for all of the talk of Freebiegate, that actually the big story of that conference really was that signal that Reeves was sending, that she might be willing to consider a change to the fiscal rules that she had said, Jeremy Hunt's fiscal rules, that she had said she would religiously stick to, and change the way the Treasury calculates debt, the way that we borrow, to basically say that if we're borrowing to invest in stuff, whether it's infrastructure or whatever it happens to be, that isn't the same as borrowing just to basically sort of service day-to-day government spending. And indeed, since we talked about it yesterday, saying that we thought it was coming, The Guardian had some reporting overnight saying that is precisely what Reeves is intending to do in the budget. And there are a couple of options that the Chancellor is apparently considering. One is to change the debt measurement to account for the value of the assets the government now holds, such as roads, schools and hospitals. That would actually potentially free up about 50 billion of extra fiscal headroom, wow. Which is serious.
That's big money.
Proper money. You could do something as well, so she's also considering, I wonder if this is where we'll end up, where she's talked about taking the less radical option of basically leaving the debt rules as they are, but excluding from them the Bank of England losses on quantitative easing. So this was basically the Bank of England printing money, borrowing Treasury bonds during the pandemic in particular, and before that, and after the financial crisis. And if you were to do that, then you would potentially free up between 10 and 20 billion. So again, serious money, but not necessarily the same order of magnitude as the 50.
Yeah, the other thing that's been really interesting is something that cropped up in Prime Minister's questions today, because you'll remember the Reeves mantra was, I will not increase taxes on working people. And she ruled out specifically VAT, national insurance and income tax. But Rishi Sunak has gone straight for the little grey area that has not yet been ruled out when he asked Keir Starmer, when you're talking about national insurance, what about raising the tax on employers' national insurance contributions? Are they working people? And Keir Starmer has not yet ruled that out. So this is where the grey area lies.
Mr. Speaker, when he talks about security at work, once again, it's one rule for him and another rule for everyone else. Yeah. But I know that not everything or everyone has survived his first 100 days in government. So can he confirm that when he promised not to raise income tax, national insurance or VAT, that commitment applies to both employer and employee national insurance contributions?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, as he well knows, I'm not going to get drawn on decisions that will be set out. We made an absolute commitment in relation to not raising tax on working people. He, of course, was the expert's expert on raising taxes.
Yes, I thought that was really interesting, and clearly, I mean, Sunak, who obviously was Chancellor, so he knows exactly how to. He's obviously quite enjoying being. Well, he's not enjoying being leader of the opposition, but he's clearly enjoying being the one asking the questions. A sort of small pleasure of his current predicament.
Yes, it's just to expose the awkwardness of the Labour government.
Yeah, quite. And so I think that's clearly going to be a lot more speculation now about whether the Chancellor does intend to raise NI on employers. And I thought actually Starmer's answers throughout actually revealed something else, which is it was like another kind of narrative shift for the government. Like he kept talking about less about the past, more about being very, very sort of positive about kept talking about all the investment which is flowing into the country as a result of the changes that has happened. I mean, one of the problems, as we've discussed on the show, for the government many times over this, what is a brief 100 days or so, is that it has had so many changes of narrative very, very quickly. It'll be interesting to see whether the hand of Morgan McSweeney, the new chief of staff, is behind this one and be about being a bit more positive. I'm not sure, but it will be interesting to see if this one sticks.
Yeah, I mean, they just need a bit of consistency and confidence in the messaging that they're giving out and sticking to it so that they are presenting people with a narrative. I mean, this budget can't come soon enough, as we have discussed so many times, because obviously at Prime Minister's questions, he's not going to start ruling this in and ruling that out, because, you know, she's trying to work out what the budget and the shape of it is. And, you know, you probably haven't finalised every fiscal plan yet, because you still wait for events and whether anything is going to blow something off course. So Keir Starmer can't, but it shows the vulnerability that there has been in the government over the decisions they take. But it does look like a new course is being set for them in the way they calculate what they can spend.
But I think the problem with that is, and this will be really difficult, I think, for Reeves to be able to kind of politically pirouette to, in terms of kind of how she justifies it. Reeves was unequivocal in a way that, to be honest, she did not need to be when she was in opposition, to say that she would not, under any circumstances, change the fiscal rules, that she would stick with them. She, as recently as the July update, where she abolished the winter fuel payments for most pensioners, as recently as that point, was saying that we would not pay, or this government would not pay for things that they could not afford, that every penny piece would need to be accounted for. To shift from that, which was only in July, to potentially borrowing to invest tens of billions of pounds of extra capital infrastructure, is not economically difficult to justify. I think it's probably the right thing to do. Many economists would say that, given how much chronic underinvestment there is in the British economy. But politically, it's quite hard to justify, because, and I think illustrates, to be honest, the confusion which has sat at the heart of this government since the beginning on quite basic principles and precepts about what it is about and what its strategy for the political economy of the UK is going to be.
We'll be back in just a second with a new newsagents campaign. It's very important. We're not normally a campaigning podcast, but we've been made aware of a particularly deserving and slightly harrowing case of a radio presenter who feels slightly neglected. So we thought you'd want to listen.
The most important vote of the day is the vote for what we're going to call our new feature on this programme. It is a feature, a regular feature that we are not intending to forget about by the end of the week, as we usually do with newly launched exciting regular features. We don't know what the sound effect can be, albeit that the last time I asked for a sound effect was 10 weeks ago and it still hasn't arrived yet. You know, when the newsagents ask for something, they get it half an hour before they asked for it.
That's right.
I don't know if you listen to the Newsagents podcast. If Emily Maitlis asks for something in this building, she gets it half an hour before she asks for it. I've seen her sit down at her desk to discover a cup of tea that was made half an hour later, because they were so keen that it be hot when she sits down at her... You come in, you ask for a sound effect, and they've got it half an hour before they asked for it. I asked for a sound effect for Idiot's Corner, just like a slamming door or something like that. I could even have done it myself. Here you go. There you go. 10 weeks I asked for that, and I've still got nothing. It's almost as if I'm not treated with the respect I deserve as the most popular presenter on the entire radio station. But hey-ho, these are the crosses I bear on your behalf.
You won't
That
have
is
recognised
sad, to be fair.
that voice,
That is
but
very
that was a
sad.
little-known LBC presenter, James O'Brien. Clock that name just in case he ever makes it big one day.
I didn't know you were capable of time travel,
Yes.
with your tea in particular.
Yes.
Yeah.
And luckily, he doesn't feel bitter or twisted about that at all, does he?
he's not worked up.
But as you can see, what he's genuinely aggrieved at is his lack of a jingle, lack of a sound effect.
So what we thought, actually, is that you, our listeners, could help James with the cross that he's bearing. So today we are launching the Get James a Jingle campaign.
Jim a jingle.
Get Jim a Jingle campaign. Some
Yeah.
negative
Hashtag
connotations
Get
there,
Jim
but
a Jingle.
Yeah.
Get Jim a Jingle campaign. And we're asking you, our newsagents listeners, to devise, create a series of jingles for Jim, to use
I mean,
on
we've
his
said
show.
jingle. It could be, as you've heard, any sound effect. So just send him a sound effect, and he, I think, will.
And maybe
will
one
probably
day
offer
he'll
to
stop
pledge-
complaining.
Yeah, he's going to pledge to play all of your sound effects on his show over the coming days.
Newsagents@global.com.
Yeah.
We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.